name is Erik. I tried to get away without doing a presentation for this conference. I presented a lot of conferences, but Lucid kind of shanghaied me and said, you got to do a presentation. So I said, I'm going to do one on something that I really love, and libraries is where it's at. So I thought I'd do a talk on that. There's the abstract. Not going to read that. I'll just like to put it in the slide deck there. There actually is really a solar powered library. I Googled it up, and sure enough, there's a library in Texas. It's got electric plugs out there for your electric cars. It's got covered parking that has solar panels on the top of the parking, and some kind of wells underneath for the water and so on. So sure enough, there is really a solar powered library. And they said they're actually energy net zero. So in fact, they fed energy back into the system, it said in the news article I read. So pretty impressive there. I'm really a card-carrying library geek. My first work with Lucene and Solr actually was in a library at the University of Virginia. I worked for a group called Applied Research and Patacriticism. Very strange name, but we did some pretty cool stuff. It was a small grant-funded group where we got to play with humanities data, particularly 19th century literature. The Rossetti Archive was the primary data set that the professor I worked for was interested in. And it was the Rossetti Archive, 19th century literature. And he aggregated data from many, many institutions that had 19th century art, poetry, and so on. And we created the RossettiArchive.org. NINES, which is the networked infrastructure for 19th century electronic scholarship that allowed you to facet search across these disparate sources of data. And then we generalized that into a system called Collex. It actually stands for collect and exhibit, where you can, and it was built to be a general purpose system. We'll see a screenshot of that in just a minute, where it didn't matter the type of data that was fed in there. You could facet search on it. You could collect those objects by simply saying, tag the object, put it into my tag sphere, or build an exhibit out of it. So take these objects and repurpose them into new materials that you're producing, research, and so on. And in fact, this stuff was built even before Solr was out. Using a practice called resume-driven development. I used Ruby on Rails and built an XML-RPC server on top of Lucene. I built my facets inside of that XML-RPC server. Certainly wasn't scalable to the type of stuff that Yannick's put into Solr. But that's where it started for me with this stuff. And over time, this Collex stuff, the NINES stuff, got generalized even further. The people that worked I worked in a library, but I didn't work for the library. But people that worked for the library came to me and said, hey, I see you're doing this stuff with NINES and so on. Can this work for library data? And being very naive and not understanding library data at the time, I said, absolutely, of course. It's just data, it's just metadata. Little did I know that there's a very complex type of data structure called MARC that you have to deal with to get library data in, so I had to learn that. But kind of in my own free time, I built a system that took the MARC records in and made faceted search on top of that. I distilled the Collex more sophisticated system out into a very lightweight Ruby on Rails UI, and I called it Solr Flare. That used to be in Solr Subversion. Nobody really played with it or cared about it too much, so it's on my GitHub kind of archive there. But Flare turned into this project called Blacklight. And we'll talk about Blacklight a little bit later. And through all that experiences, I started doing presentations at the Code for Lib conferences. I've been to a bunch of those things and just came back. I went to one in February in Chicago, and it's really awesome to hang with library geeks. These people, they're all about helping people find information and making the world a better place. So it's good stuff there. And through all those initiatives, I've gotten to go to Taiwan and present about Solr and Solr Flare there. I went to the Library of Congress and gave a presentation actually called Solr Powered Libraries back in 2007 there as well. and so on. And there's actually been some publications that I contributed to about this, the blacklight work and doing Lucene and Solr in the library sphere as well. And also I got to go to wonderful Windsor, Ontario for a Lucene summit. That's actually kind of how Lucid started, believe it or not. I met a guy named Mark Krellenstein there, who was our kind of company founder, and the rest is history there on Lucid. And the electronic information for libraries, the free and open source software division of that, brought me to Italy to talk about how we can use the free software for developing and transitional countries and so on. So the LibraryWorks has allowed me to go kind of far with this stuff, and it's a passion of mine. So this is what Rossetti Archive currently looks like. This is what it looked like back in 2006 or so when we built this thing. It hasn't really changed any. And the whole idea here was to allow serendipitous discovery of new objects that were there. And so this whole more like this that we know is in Solr and so on, we wired that thing in there and played a lot with that to allow people to find new objects that they may not have already known about. And then here's Nines. This is Collex, but using the 19th century data. There were other projects that actually use the Collex open source software to put their data in it, but this is the Nines stuff where we have, of course, faceted browsing and so on. And you could tag objects, and those tags were then searchable. You could save your searches, and basic things like that. And believe it or not, the original inverted index is the card catalog. So libraries, they've been doing this stuff for a long time, and it's big data before there was the term big data. There's a bunch of projects out there. I'm just going to kind of sample, show you different things that are out there. The Internet Archive spun off a project called the Open Library. It is the goal of that is that there is a web page for every book, and it's wiki style in that you can actually go there and edit the information. In fact, when I was doing these slides last night for this stuff, I looked at the Open Library, and it had lowercase action for Lucene and action. So I created an account, and I edited it, and I made it uppercase action there. So you can actually go in there and edit the metadata and so on yourself. There is a site called, this is not Solr Powered, it's actually Lucene Elasticsearch powered there. But this is a new site that's out there that is pretty cool, very nice UI. It's got APIs for developers to extend and build things on. And they've got this cool timeline thing. So I thought I would feature that one as well. Again, a pretty new project that's out there. Wikimedia, MediaWiki. These projects are using Lucene and Solr. Solr is actually under the covers of several MediaWiki extensions. There's a translation memory service that's out there that allows you to find translations that are common out there, so you don't have to retranslate things. And then there's a geodata extension, and I believe there's a number of other efforts underway to put Solr inside of Wikipedia and the other Wikimedia Foundation projects out there. In fact, one of the goals that's out there is also to Solr power the search for Wikipedia itself. Right now, it's a heavily modified Lucene, is what it actually says in their documentation there. That powers the site search. Volunteers have been building this for quite a while, and so when you go in there and type things in there, that's Lucene powered there. This one is going to be a fun topic here. We have actually the guy from HathiTrust in the room here, Mr. Tom Burton West. So if there's any questions about that, I'm sure he'll be happy to field those. This is big data in the sense that it is millions of books, 10.5 million books currently, that are being OCR'd, the full text of the books. There's 400 languages, I believe you said, out there in that collection. It's actually 450 terabytes of images, I believe, of the actual size of the collection. In terms of the actual text, it's 12 terabytes of data. Anybody else in the room have anything of this scale? I mean, this is absolutely enormous stuff there. Now, we know 10 million documents. I mean, many people are doing much more than that in Lucene and Solr. but not full text books and not 400 languages. Okay, so this is very, very serious stuff that these people are doing here with this. Tom has done a number of presentations, most recently this one, also in Chicago at the Code for Lib conference. And inside that, books are different. It's very large text. The OCR is imperfect, as you can imagine, especially with all those different languages. Tom has broken Lucene more than once. More than once, he has actually literally broken the term count in Lucene. It exceeded the 2 billion terms that it originally handled with an int. So we had to go to a long for the term count inside of that, and it's all thanks to libraries that did that. And he's got this incredible blog that's out there where he has detailed a number of these things. I will encourage him to keep updating that blog. I know it's not his day job, but he's got some really awesome materials out there in terms of a number of things. One, too many words. How do you handle the term stuff? He had issues with the term count, where he had to get that fixed in Lucene. In fact, I think it was like a 0-day fix. He posted it kind of in the morning, and by the end of the day, Lucene had, on trunk of Lucene, it had been committed to turn it into a long unit test and everything. So some pretty awesome turnaround time there, thanks to Mike McCandless, particularly for that one. You'll see he's got some exceptions in there. He actually has written about the impossible exception that's actually literally inside of Solr. It should never, ever get there, but it did. He has written about the common grams there because there's so many terms there. And the term frequencies are so high for some of these things, you need to play some tricks there to allow the queries to perform well enough. And so there's this common gramming in there where you can gram terms together with their successive term, so that when you search, when the term dictionary is actually reduced because you've indexed fewer terms, you're indexing the kind of the pairs there. And also, when it comes to particularly Chinese search, is what he blogged about there, is another issue that he came across was with Solr's query parser. Being able to generate, if you type in a number of Chinese characters and there's no spaces between them, it generated phrase query for that whole thing. Even though the tokenizer broke the terms, each Chinese character became a separate term, it basically still turned it into a phrase query rather than an ANDed or an ORed query across those multiple terms, and it wasn't able to find what you were looking for there. So very interesting stuff, and I believe he kind of reported this, and thanks to Robert Meir and other Lucene committers, this kind of stuff got addressed and fixed over time there. There's some other projects that are going on at the HathiTrust. There's a HathiTrust Research Center where they're basically exposing their materials for people to be able to develop against, and as a sandbox or playground there to work with that data. So very exciting stuff there with the HathiTrust project. And I think we'll probably come back to that with Q&A, and we can have Tom talk about some of that stuff. Some other big institutions using Solr, the Smithsonian Institution. They have a very nice search site, collections.si.edu. And I've seen Qingxin Wang from the Smithsonian present on this a number of times. We actually worked with Smithsonian. I was on site at the Smithsonian for a week doing Solr training and doing some other stuff that I'll talk about in a second. And they have a very complicated data flow in terms of they've got all of these different data sources. They've got many different back-end systems that are built on all different types of databases and library information systems and so on. And they had to come up with basically a common document data structure so that all of them could export their data into their common flavor, common data, and then import that stuff. And they had kind of an interesting workflow where they import the data from this common XML that they generated from all these different systems into a Solr, basically with minimal fields, a timestamp and an XML blob field. And maybe the data source that it came from. And they did that simply so they could have a single data store that they could query for all of these documents by time and get the data there. And what they did then is, using a newly developed capability here, the Solr entity processor, is read the data from one Solr, write it to another Solr, and in that process it broke it all out into all the metadata that was contained in that XML so that you get all your facets and all the other stuff, full text searchable goodness there. So this was basically a Smithsonian developed feature there. They have user tagging. You can create lists of things as well. Another thing that they have, and you'll see this in the screenshot, is this negative exclude filtering, which you don't see that in pretty much any other system that I've seen. I had that in Solar Flare and the early versions of Blacklight. I think usability studies kind of said that was kind of too complicated for users or something, but it's a feature I actually really like. Let's take a look at that. This is where I searched for Blacklight. They're not using Blacklight. This is, I think, JSPs that they're using to build the UI. And I filtered on online media images, and then I minused off the specimen labels for online media. And you can see right here where they've got plus and minus by their facets. And so you can click that minus and take that away from the results. You don't see, does anybody else building that kind of thing into their systems? We got one right here. So it's a really nice way to allow people to navigate the data and take things away from the data set that way. So a nice feature that I think more people should kind of think about building in there. Another thing that they allow is tagging of information. And this is the publication that I mentioned earlier, where our group somewhere is listed in here, right here, for a Web 2.0 system for findability and library collections. I contributed. These are the people that I worked with at the University of Virginia. And it doesn't say Blacklight or Solr anywhere in this description, but I went in there the other day and I tagged that particular object with Blacklight and Solr. Now if you go to the Smithsonian collections and you search for Solr, S-O-L-R, you'll find this one. So, and there's actually an option in their search things to exclude user tags from your search criteria, you know, if you didn't want to find things that people had tagged in funny ways or something. I'll just give a shout here to one of the vendors out there that is using Solr. They came to the Code for Lib conference to do training, and they do some pretty important stuff here. A lot of libraries, you know, libraries like free stuff, but these are vendors that make you pay for their services. But they provide a very useful service in that they have a single unified index across many publications that libraries actually don't have the full text for. So they subscribe to this service and pay for it. So just another one of those library systems that leverages Solr there. This is another project, the Astrophysics Data Systems Lab. It's a consortium, a project that's Smithsonian, NASA, and Harvard are all collaborating on this particular one. And this is a presentation. This information right here is from a presentation also from that Code for Lib 2013 conference by Jay Luker, who talked about name normalization. So many different names in their data, formatted different ways, and you know, diacritics and all these other types of things in there. And he did a very nice presentation walking you through lots of different examples of weird cases that they had to deal with when you're trying to find people's names here. And I just screenshotted a couple of his slides there to show what he did there. And this is just an example page that he created to showcase how the matching worked, so that you search for a particular name and it would find it with different variations and so on. And he talked about how they used Solr's customizable analysis chain there to plug in things to normalize names, to do transliterations, query variations filter. I'm not quite sure what that one is. And then they got synonyms in there for different, curated synonyms that they plugged in there. So pretty fancy stuff that they've done just for astrophysics data search there. Next up, I'm just going to talk briefly about this one because it's a competitor to Blacklight, but this is Viewfind. This is a PHP-based UI framework. So one of the things that people often when they come to Solr, you get your data in there, and then you can see XML, right? You search and you get XML or JSON, and you can, you got that /browse also that comes with Solr, but it's not considered a best practice to deploy that, of course, to the public because you don't want to expose that as a UI straight from Solr. But it's a nice prototype UI that's built into Solr there. But obviously, people want UI that they can plug on top of Solr at the very least just to get started. Get my data in there, allow me to explore my data in some fashion. So there's two main projects I'm going to talk about. Viewfind is one of them. It's from Villanova University, so that's why it's VUFind. And it currently powers the HathiTrust main UI, although I know they're using Blacklight for some other things, and they may refactor to have Blacklight there. But there's many, many other sites that are Viewfind powered. It's a very nice site here. If you go to that URL, you'll see the sites with links to the sites, and it tells you what operating system they're deployed on, whether they're live or in prototyping stage or beta or whatever. It's got a very nice chart of all the users that have self-identified, obviously, that are using this. So then there's probably 100 different sites on there, libraries that are on there. Here is an example of Viewfind. It's all very traditional facets and search, and it's PHP based. And I have not tried Viewfind myself, but I imagine it's quite easy to take an existing Solr, do a little bit of configuration in the Viewfind stuff, and voila, you can point it at your Solr, your data, and have basically this UI in very short order. And you can also do the same thing with this thing, Blacklight. Blacklight came from the University of Virginia. Again, it's distilled from solar flare. I named it Blacklight. It's UVA, University of Virginia. Solar radiation is Blacklight, so that's where the name came from. It's a Ruby on Rails front end to Solr. It's deployed in production at these and many others. They also have at projectblacklight.org a page that shows the many people that are using and have deployed that with links to their site. So there's even more than what's listed here. Let's see, some ones to call out here. The New York Public Library, they are very innovative. They've got kind of a labs set up there, and they use Blacklight on a number of different projects. North Carolina State University, again, another very innovative library system where they're using that. Columbia University, they've got, I think on the Blacklight user page, they've got 4 or 5 different projects that are using Blacklight and Solr under the covers there. I've been to the USDA where they're using Blacklight for their document search there, and so on. It's also, Blacklight is embedded in another project called Project Hydra. This is a bigger institutional kind of repository system that many institutions are now looking at and adopting there. It's embedded into another system there. And also, I'll show you. There, I forgot to call out these, but you'll see the initial contributors there. Stanford, where Google came from, they're using Solr for their library search system. I just searched for findability here, and there's the publication that's got us in there with the early Blacklight stuff as well. The Stanford project. This searchworks is what it's called, searchworks.stanford.edu. They've done some pretty awesome stuff when it comes to leveraging Solr's advanced query parser capabilities. So that was one of the purposes of doing this presentation, was to kind of call out some of these fancy features that you can use with Solr that came kind of from the library world. And this advanced search page, in library data, it's very complicated data. There's a lot of metadata about a book. You have author, you have co-authors, you have secondary authors. You've got title, you've got secondary title, subtitle, all different kinds of levels of metadata. Where the general public, they just know there's a title to a book. They don't realize there's all this nuanced metadata under the covers there. So what happens when you start trying to do these sophisticated searches here? Because there's multiple fields that are title, you need to query across them. And not only do you need to query across multiple fields just for a couple of words in this box, but what do you do when there's a couple of words in this box as well? There's many different subjects for a book. There's topic headings, there's geographic subjects, there's literally like dozens, hundreds maybe even of subject type fields of metadata associated with books. And so it's very sophisticated to do this. You would think that you could simply normalize all this stuff at index time into a title field. Well, it doesn't work that way for librarians. They are very particular about these things, and they want weighting across different fields. They want the primary title to be weighted heavier than the secondary title, but they're not the same, and they shouldn't be stuffed into the same field. What they do at Stanford SearchWorks here, and this is actually a screenshot, it's not text there, from a presentation that Naomi Duché did, who's at Stanford, on how they used Solr's nested query parsing capabilities to do this sort of thing. And so, and maybe you don't know this. Maybe do people know about this underscore query underscore trick? Few people? Anybody? Anybody? All right. Well, this is a good one. So in Solr, the Lucene query parser in Solr, which is the Solr query parser, it's not the one that comes from Lucene. It's a subclass of the Lucene one, so it has the same syntax, but it's schema aware and so on. But it adds a few backdoors to the Lucene syntax. And the way it can add a backdoor is by doing it through a field hack right here. So this is actually a field name right here, this underscore query underscore colon. And when it sees that in the query parser as a field name, what it does is it calls out to the query parser again and parses the subquery, the nested query. And inside that nested query, and you may know about this curly bracket bang syntax. People know about that syntax? A few people, yeah, a lot of people know about that one. You can nest a query parser inside of that, and the dismax query parser has QF and PF and so on, and surround that with quotes. So it's extremely ugly, but it allows you to do some very nuanced things where they say here QF equals $ title QF here, and $ title underscore PF here for this one, and you can do parameter substitution in direction, so inside of their Solr config, or you can pass the parameters in. You can have another parameter that says QF is main title, subtitle, secondary title, whatever, all the other ones, and have the different weightings in there. And then you can and that with another one that is the subject or the author or whatever, and have a very sophisticated query that weights titles one way and authors a different way, and ands or ors those things however you'd like here. So this is the full query right here with the and in there. So this is Lucene query parser syntax using this backdoor underscore query thing. Now in, I think Solr 4.0, but it could have been one of the other 4.x releases. I can't keep up these days. That underscore query underscore has now been, it's no longer necessary. So you can simply do curly bracket bang stuff in there without the underscore query underscore colon quotes around that whole thing. So the syntax has become a little bit cleaner. Obviously, it's still quite complicated with this stuff, and with the parameter substitution, you can keep it a bit clean with that sort of thing. Okay, so another great gem from the library world on how to do these nested queries and nuanced boosting and so on. This is John Hopkins, another big contributor to the Blacklight project. The only reason I put this one in there, it's all very traditional stuff here, but they've got this little widget here where they allow you to do date range searching, and they give you a bar graph of the facet counts and so on. So just a neat little widget there. I have to put this one in there because it's so darn cool. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame catalog is powered by Blacklight. And this is the t-shirt from the Code for Lib conference here. And that's basically the end of the presentation. I'm going to show you a demonstration of out-of-the-box Solr with Blacklight on top of it. Okay, so there's a few pointers here to some miscellaneous things, and libraries rock. So let's just start Solr up. I've already got the example data index. So I've already done java-jar, post.jar, star.xml. And so Solr is up and running. There's the search, right? So you guys seen this. You've seen this. This is the /browse out of Solr. Search for iPad. But no, I meant iPod because iPad's not in the data, and so on, right? So that's there. Now I need to start up Blacklight. It's very easy to get up and running with Blacklight. A few little kind of tricky configuration things, but there's a quick start page. It walks you through the whole thing. Again, it's a JRuby on Rails. It's just a plain old Ruby on Rails application. I like to use JRuby, so I'm firing it up with JRuby here. And what that gives us now is Blacklight right here, pointed at that same configuration. It's JRuby, it's Java, it's taking a second here to refresh, and voila, we're there. And we have the facets. I pointed at just a couple of the facets out of the sample data. You can drill into the electronics. I can search for iPod and get the results, and you can drill into those things and get a detailed view of it. You can save your searches. And let's see why I'm not seeing all of that stuff up there. Yeah, okay, so it's right there. I have some saved searches, and it basically does that. It's got user account management, so you can log in, so that saves it for you, and so on. So it's a rich, full-featured UI with and in fact, I used the Blacklight configuration to. It asks you to change your Solr config because it looks for a couple of different request handlers in there that are custom for Blacklight. However, the configuration on the Ruby side of things allows you to customize which request handlers you're doing. So rather than modifying my Solr config, which is again is out-of-the-box Solr at this point, I changed the Blacklight configuration, just a couple of lines of things, and pointed at just the /select handler to do the search results here, as well as the detail view. And you can see what the requests are that are going to Solr right here. You can see when I drill into a detail. Let's see, is that the detail one? Yeah, so it's. There's the Q equals. Anyway, there's this whole thing right here where it's, let me refresh this page here. And yeah, you can customize the request handlers and so on there. And this is the Ruby file where you can configure the Qt here. I had to blank it out. Normally it was search, so you had to put a search request handler in there. But this is all I had to change right here was pointed at the default out-of-the-box Solr. So there's Blacklight in a nutshell, allowing you, again, quick, easy user interface right on top of Solr. Okay, I think I got 1 minute left, so how was that for timing?